What does a beautiful future look like to you?
You can flip a negative mood on its head.
This was a talk that was all over the place, but then New York, you are all over the place.
There are experiences that you just don't get anywhere else.
Hello, I'm Taj Greenlee, Associate Director of 92Y Talks. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our event, Hulu's Kid 90, Soleil Moon Frye in conversation with Demi Moore. We're honored to bring actor and director Soleil Moon Frye together with the incomparable Demi Moore to discuss this documentary. From her time as star of the beloved 80s and current reboot of Punky Brewster, Frye filmed hundreds of hours of video documenting her life, family, and friendships outside of the spotlight. Young stars like David Arquette, Dorff, and Mark-Paul Gosselaar appear throughout the unprecedented, candid, and deeply personal footage that reveals how fame impacted the lives of young actors in a pre-internet era. Our moderator, Demi Moore, is an acclaimed actress and author who's appeared in films like St. Elmo's Fire, A Few Good Men, Indecent Proposal, and most recently, Peacock's Brave New World adaptation based on Aldous Huxley's famous dystopian novel. It's always a treat to bring together friends on our stage, and we hope you enjoy this very special event. Once again, on behalf of the 92nd Street Y, we appreciate your patronage and hope you now enjoy Kid 90, Soleil Moon Frye in conversation with Demi Moore. Here's the trailer for Kid 90, currently available on Hulu.
Please, are not in a good mood.
Good, this is what I want on tape. Soleil not smiling for once, like the whole world thinks she always is.
At 7 years old, I was cast as Punky Brewster.
I remember Saved by the Bell director saying, the minute you walk onto the stage, you're no longer a child anymore, you're an adult.
Did you miss me?
There were 12 kids in the business. We all knew everyone.
We would talk for 2-3 hours and fall asleep on the phone. We were just so close.
I carried a camera with me everywhere I went. We weren't concerned about the internet. We did the things that teenagers did. We just happened to be in Hollywood.
Hey, what's up? This is Mark Wahlberg calling for Soleil.
It was all kind of innocent to begin with. Then it just...
It got pretty crazy. It was like our 60s.
I started developing rapidly. People were calling me Punky Boobster.
The last couple weeks have been weird, having guys pinch my ass, you know.
Men treated me more like a woman and not a 13-year-old.
This business, I don't feel it's a place for children.
You start getting in your head, worrying about how you're perceived.
Friends were reaching out for help.
It seemed like I was losing a friend every week.
This is really the first time I'm watching the tapes back. Now that I've opened Pandora's box, I can't put any of this back.
The most awkward period in your life, and that's when we were in front of the cameras.
By you sharing these tapes, you realize you're not alone.
I felt like I was alive when I was in the rawness of it. The amount of love that was there.
Learning who I was and what life was meant to be, that was with you.
I didn't know what true self-love was until this process.
Can't believe you have this.
I don't know the ending. I am absolutely discovering it as we go. The big question is, what happens once I unlock the vault?
Hello. I'm really honored to be doing this. You know, we have a long friendship. I was calculating last night that it's we're almost at 20 years. At this point.
And I had met you even before that.
Yes. Which I love that little bit of footage at the Planet Hollywood opening that you went to, which is interesting because, you know, we were in really different places in our lives. And one of the things that I wanted, you know, to kind of jump into that I realized is, you know, I've known you for almost 20 years, but the 20 years that you unlocked in this documentary are the years that I didn't know you. And so watching the documentary, and I have had the privilege of seeing a couple of different incarnations, but this one, which really shifted into being framed around your journey, I feel like I got to know a whole other part of you, a whole other aspect. And it was equally fascinating because it's also, I was already having children at this time. And so it was in a very different place. And I was thinking about, you know, this big question that you bring through this is, did things happen the way you remember them? And did they?
Oh, you know, I had so many beautiful memories of childhood and youth and the spark of being a teenager. And I turned 40 years old, and as you know, I started to question who I was in addition to these incredible children, in addition to the wife that I had become. And I wondered, did those years exist the way I remembered them? Because I remember that spark of living in New York City and feeling like the world was at my fingertips, and that feeling of immortality that we feel when we're young. And I started wondering, did things happen the way that I remember them in this colorful, vibrant light? And so I went into Pandora's box, and what did I discover but true self-love and self-awakening? Process, what I really didn't realize was that I had locked it away, and as much as there was love and joy and beauty, there was so much pain that I locked away in those Tupperware boxes in a vault that I don't know that I ever planned on opening, you know, until I did, and through that realized that my teen self had really left a chronological blueprint for me to find my way back home to the artist that I once was, and that I have rediscovered in myself.
Do you think, and I don't know that how did this how did this come about? And I'm going to do a very human thing because I hear something crackling, so pardon me. And I was, sorry, I'm back. I had a candle that was being so loud that it was distracting me. So how did it come about? Like, what was the impetus that like moved you to opening Pandora's box?
You know, so as a teenager, you know, I carried my video camera everywhere I went. I documented everything. From 5 years old on, I carried a diary. 12 years old, I got an audio recorder for my 12th birthday. And then years later, a video camera. And that became the way in which I looked at the world. And so I filmed everything, locked it away. And I think, you know, I think part of it was also that by my early 20s, I had lost some of my best friends. And so I think it was just too painful to revisit, but I didn't really realize it at the time. And I had this kind of unconventional life in the best way. And there was so much love and pain. And I think I was really craving tradition in a way. I can see that in retrospect now. You know, it took me years to realize this and years of weaving it together. But so, you know, so I think in that way, I really craved some tradition, and I met Jason and I fell in love, and I got married by the time I was 22 years old, and I had babies and a really beautiful, very full life in so many ways. And as I was raising my babies and in realizing it now, you know, in trying to really search for where this all came from, what was the precipice, you know, what was that moment in which I decided to go back. I remember having my 40th birthday, and during that birthday and that new age, I really started to look around me and go, okay, who am I, Soleil, the artist? You know, who, like I was saying, who am I? In addition to my children, in addition to this life, who am I? And like I was talking about that spark, I had always associated that with youth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I had really felt that spark in a really long time. And I thought that was about being young. I really did equate that to being young.
You mean almost as if it was like something that was there and now is gone, and that's just
and that we live our lives, and not to dismiss or take away from all of those beautiful years with my children and family, but that spark of the artist, the spark of the journalist, the spark of my truth, you know, my inner truth, which is that you can be all things, that I can be a mother and I can be an artist and I can have my voice, you know? And so I started going back to the diaries and the videos. I tried to make the documentary about everything but me.
Mm-hmm.
I did not plan on this being about me. And as I peeled back the onion layer after layer and read through the diaries and watched the footage over and over, it became this deeply personal coming of age story that was a coming of age story both of my teen self and my adult self.
And your current self. It was a rediscovering of a piece of you that you'd put away. It's not that you had lost it, you had just put it away for a while.
Yeah. And then I started feeling that spark ignite more and more and more as I discovered my voice and my truth and my authenticity of just peeling back to my core. And it ignited in such a deep, meaningful way for me.
So it was interesting because it was so obvious in the doc, the love that existed in your family, and even as unconventional as it was. And I know kind of the story about your father, and yet I hadn't really seen how present he was in many respects in there at key moments, and just the joy I witnessed, and I know you to be a loving, affectionate, exuberant person, but there was a sense of freedom in your expression that was so beautiful in the documentary. And obviously you talk about it being in this different time that isn't bound by what we're experiencing today, what your children, my children are experiencing with social media. And so there was an innocence as well, as you were discovering that other filter that we see now that has so much consciousness on, you know, what the camera might be seeing. And I guess I was wondering, and I think you said it somewhere in there that or maybe I just was thinking it, is that what was it about being behind the camera? What was that doing for you? Because it coincided with feeling a certain loss of control.
Yeah. Well, I was going through puberty and all of these insecurities that I can only imagine today how magnified they are through the lens of social media, right? At this time, we didn't have social media, so it was very different. But I was feeling all of these insecurities. You know, I talked very openly about my breast reduction and how righteous I was in a way that I thought, okay, I'm going to share this story and it's going to help people. And it was incredible because it really did help so many, and women would tell me these incredible stories. but the way in which the media framed it, the way in which it became kind of a punchline, here I wanted to be so, I wanted to be taken seriously by my peers and by other artists. And, I was so committed to being this true artist, and the kind of roles that I was then getting at that time were very much like these kind of tits and ass, teen roles.
I saw that. I was.
By the way, I had a great time making those movies. We had so much fun, but at the same time, I was really searching for my truth. So I was very fortunate to find so much of that depth through theater. I started doing theater, which was amazing, and that was incredible. And really picking up the camera, like I talk about in the doc, right, was like a way of controlling it and being like, fuck you, I'm an artist and I'm gonna do my art. And at the same time as it was a way of capturing the world around me and turning it away from myself, to really document the world around me, I think it also became a protective device in a way.
I was thinking that, like, it became this buffer where you could be there, but have that peace between you and whatever was happening.
Exactly. And I think for me, as an artist, always wanting to drink it all in, wanting to experience so much in life, and that teen journalist, the camera really became a protective device. And I realize it now because then years later, when I went on the road with my father, who was suffering from Alzheimer's, and we drove cross country, I brought the camera with me. I think it's always been a protective device. And I've really had to look at that and examine that, of why is it that I have felt this need to shield or to protect or buffer myself in some way. And I think it really, if I really am being honest with myself, it's that if in some way I can turn these experiences into art, the pain of our life, my life, the joy of my life into art, then it has a whole other purpose, and so for me, from the time I was little, my father was a civil rights activist, my mom always, an advocate activist, and we were taught to let our scars be our art and let our pain turn into our creative expression. And thank God for creative expression, because for me, I believe, and I love in your book when you talk about this so beautifully, that for me, I feel everything happened for me and not to me. And I wouldn't change a thing about it, about the messiness, the pain, all of it.
What do you think you were protecting?
As far as myself behind the lens?
Like at that time, what do you think it was? I mean, I think once people see it, and I think that objectifying of you, to go from being a little girl to having men treat you as an object, treat you differently, to see you, to be treating you, even though you were still a little girl, as a sexual being when you hadn't even yet fully discovered yourself.
Right, which is happening so much today also, right? I mean, think about, right, if the similarities of what is happening now, and all the more reason that is so important for us as journalists, documentarians, writers, to share these stories. I look at those experiences then, and how I felt that I was this little girl, and I always held Punky so close to my heart. I still do. I always say, if I'm 88 or 108 and people are calling me Punky, I'm thrilled with it. It's the other people in the world that it felt like, so many other people that didn't want me to grow up. I was fine. I was thrilled to go through puberty, and then I was so happy.
Really wanting you not like they wanted
fit you into some kind of box.
They put you in a little capsule and keep you as that cute, sassy.
Yes, stay little, stay
are.
Forever. So I look at it today with having daughters that are coming of age themselves, and the fact that the truth is one size doesn't fit all. And the objectification that happens today is just magnified, in my view, by social media and the filters and the world in which, surrounds us, in which we really have to, I believe it is fundamental for us to have these conversations, because it happened then and now it's completely magnified. And so I'm grateful that people are sharing these stories and telling these stories of both then and now.
I mean, I definitely relate, and in having had the experience of and think about how challenging that is to go from being a girl to recognizing that different level of attention that you get from men. And I didn't have it where it was amplified in the public eye. Like yours was, but yours was on a heightened level. So I understand how empowering it must have felt to be behind the camera.
And to feel like you have some kind of sense of, I think for me, it was a way of trying to feel like I was in control in some way. And the fascinating thing to me is that I think, I think about it in the terms that, yes, I was I was growing up in Los Angeles. And so certainly there was that, right? Which was going from this childhood and this happy childhood to people treating me differently because of the fact that I was developing so rapidly. I also look at the teenagers around me today and I see the exact same thing happening, whether or not they're growing up in the business or not. And that's why I think it's such an important dialogue for us to have about the objectification of people. And also that as we grow and go through puberty, and I've had these conversations with, as have you, with my daughters and with the kids around me, of look, like my body is what it is, and I want to feel proud of it. You know what I mean? And why would anyone try to objectify someone just because one person wears a tank top and has one body size and another wears a tank top, the same tank top, and has another body size? How much pain do you know what I mean are we causing by our own objectification of people? And so I think it's a conversation that really needs to continue to be had.
You talk about discovering something that's quite painful in there, and I don't know if you're comfortable to talk about just anything, because I think there were some really important things that you bring forward. And, somebody crossed a line with you, took advantage, is my interpretation of that. And how you, for all of these years up until now, blamed yourself because you, in your mind, were being too forward, or that you were engaging in that. And I know that you and I had a very similar experience and didn't identify it as rape really up until like the last 10 years that I started to realize, well, I was 15 and actually it would be viewed as rape. And for all of these years, I blamed myself because I also don't want to be a victim. And I know for you that you are somebody who likes to take responsibility. And I think it's a powerful conversation and very brave that you were willing to share it, because I know that this was something you discovered as you were opening up this Pandora's box.
And to the shame that is wrapped up in that concept of us, or I can speak for myself at least, like, was I too forward? Was I too this? The thing was that I opened up multiple experiences that had happened, that I was, as I was trying to open the tapes and the diaries, you know, and go through it, it was, I really tried to be as authentic as possible by sharing what was discovered. And so this was not one experience, you know, these were multiple experiences that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. And also there are parts that are incredibly blurry to me that I can't really make sense of, because I mean, as an example, I remember, you know, having some ginger ale. I remember this thing that different people were talking about, GHB. I remember, you know, having some. I remember bits and pieces. I remember being on my doorstep. I then remember waking up in another room. Like, I can't put all of the pieces together because I don't know exactly what happened. Now, there's also part of me that doesn't know if anything, do you know what I mean? So not being able to piece that together, and then to find the video where I'm trying to find the answers, and I'm asking this person what happened, and, you know, did anything happen? And I'm trying to make sense of it. So my point being that, you know, I don't think things are black and white, that they are shades in between. But throughout these experiences, I did not come to terms with these experiences, and really in opening these boxes. And again, it wasn't the documentary that I was setting out to make. You know, this was like years after, and this was after doing interviews. This was after, you know, and then I was finding more and more diaries and videos and just trying to make sense of it all. So it's the long way of saying that I'm still in the process of making sense of it all. What I know I have definitely come to terms with is forgiveness of the little girl or the teenage self that felt in some way that any of this was her fault, or that because of what she was wearing, that she was asking for it, or any of the things that I wrapped up in that experience. And then even watching the videotapes, and in all honesty, you know, it took me hundreds of times of watching it, because for the first however many times I was like, well, look at what you're wearing. Well, look at, you know what I mean? The judgment that I had on myself. And that's why it's never been about the who's and the what's. It was about me needing to forgive my own self. And that's just for me and my story. And each of our stories is completely unique to ourselves.
But I think that the general concept is the same, you know, like removing the judgment, finding acceptance so that you can move into that self-love that has been absent from being able to really step into the fullness of who you are. And, you know, I really see the healing that opened up through this exploration. And, you know, it was an interesting question when you said, you know, did things happen the way you remember them? Because it's part of what becomes our individual truths, you know, and so, yes, things are the way you remember them, but sometimes there is a revisionist. There is a way in which we make up about ourselves that then create our current reality. And I think that opening it up, I can't even, in truth, you have so much documented. And I try to think about my own life. I can't even imagine what that would be like, Soleil, to like be witnessing in so many different areas. But what is so remarkable are the friendships that still exist that you have. And just, I think, the sweetness of what your group shared, and how beautiful that would be to just be able to hold that in yourself. And I love when you say at the end that it just summed up everything, which is that through this, you know, that there was that you loved and that you were loved. And I can't imagine anything more healing through witnessing even all the pain and loss than that.
It has truly been the most incredible journey in life. To what you were saying about memory, I think there's so much that we compartmentalize, and there's these tunnel ways, right? I look at it through our minds, and in unlocking some of the trauma or some of the pain, it unlocked other memories, and in unlocking the joy, it unlocked other memories. And I think that is part of this incredible experience of memory, which then led me to really deeply looking into my subconscious, my unconscious, which led me to dreaming again, like I did as a teen, which led me to writing my dreams down, to this incredible, spiritual awakening that you and I speak so much of, and to the point of those friendships and that sweetness and seeing the love. I love that the story of Danny, which you and I have spoken about, which was one of the great loves of my life. And as a teenager, I was so crazy about him, and I go on tour with him, and I have this amazing adventure with him. And literally, halfway through the process of this doc, I find a box of tapes of us on tour together, right? And so now I reconnect with him after 20 years. I go and see him, and we're in Oklahoma, and he's like, I've got this box of pictures. And I'm like, what? And here, still in my mind, I'm that teenage girl, right? That was so crazy about him. And did he love me back in the same way? And we sit and I love those moments where he's like, what you felt, I felt, we felt it, and we both experienced it. And it was so incredible because at one point, so I kept turning in cuts, and the incredible Belisa kept saying, okay, what's the glue that pulls it together? And I'm going to get to the point in a minute, but it's all very all encompassing, because she said, what's the glue? What's the glue? And I kept going back and kept doing cut after cut after cut. And finally, our dear friend Sean said, have you ever seen this documentary, Sherman's March? Because I was talking about the found footage, which started as one documentary and became another. So of course I went home, I watched Sherman's March. And at that point I realized I needed to really sit and watch these tapes back completely, fully. And I cut a full found footage, Lori and I literally, we went through and cut a full found footage version that took months upon months upon months. But it was the first time that I was listening to every audio tape. I was watching every video. And I needed to know what the backbone of this story was. And at one point we're sitting there watching the Danny footage, and I go, am I trying to cut together a love? And she goes, are you not seeing the way you guys are looking at each other? Now, I had watched this footage now 179 times. And the 180th time I finally saw the way that he was looking back at me. And I realized, if I have been looking at the world through this one perspective my entire life, then what else have I not been seeing? Because we look at the world through our lens. And how beautiful that I was able to live with this footage and these diaries and these audio tapes for so many hundreds of hours, to be able to really look at it from all of these perspectives. And through that and the process, I was able to see that not only did I love people, to your point, but I was loved. It also made me realize how many other people are in the world that feel so unloved because of the programming that we receive throughout our lives of not feeling good enough, not feeling beautiful enough, not feeling brave enough, not whatever it is that we feel.
There's so many things where we create misunderstandings and misperceptions of an experience, and then once that becomes our
narrative, right?
It becomes our truth, and that becomes our story. But I think if anybody walks away from the documentary, they can see that we aren't our story. Our story is parts of us, but we aren't our story. And that's something I feel like I've really gained from doing my book. When you take something of all of this stuff and you wrap it up and you put it in an object and then you set it free, there is a sense of liberation.
I've thought of your book so much throughout this process, really, truly, to me, and everyone has to read this book. It got me through so many days because, I mean, again, you sharing your story that is a story. Everyone has a story, right? We all have stories, and our stories are so important. And you sharing your story makes me not feel so alone, makes someone else not feel so alone, makes them realize their story is worthy. And I always go back to it happening for us and not to us. And each
that is,
I mean, you say it so beautifully. And you know that, I mean, I call you at all hours of the day, and you are my constant sister and light in my life. Your writing and your story really encouraged me, and also gave me strength to be able to.
Well, if it did, I can certainly say whatever part, I'm grateful for that. But you are really courageous in this. Having known you a long time now, I can say there were some things in this that I thought, oh, wow, I'm like, showing aspects of being a kid, exploring certain drugs, sitting in front of the toilet, sharing a return on the earlier investment.
Well, I felt like if I was going to have everybody else be honest, then I certainly had to be with myself, right?
No, but it was amazing. And like on a lighter note, since we've been kind of talking about some very heavy things, and we will come back around to that, is that like I noticed how much deeper your voice was, and how much, like, in a way, like tougher.
As a teenager, or during the interview?
You were chewing gum all the time, but if you listen to your voice is really deep. And by the way, mine was too. And I don't know, is it because we both smoked so much?
I think that.
I mean, did you hear that, or did you notice that, or no?
You're so right. And my kids laugh at me sometimes, and they go, "Mom, you have multiple voices," and it's interesting, because it's so interesting you say that. Because, okay, well, first of all, yes, I think we chain smoke a lot. The other thing is, I think you and I both have very raspy voices.
We do, but I mean, as kids, it was like really almost like rock.
But I think that I think it's interesting, because I feel like my voice is, in finding my voice is coming back to more of that voice that I had then, in a way, which is fascinating. When it's the first time I've really thought about it, but I do realize, like, the huskiness and the raspy, like, it's as if my voice has even changed on a metaphorical level and on a physical level.
But it was just an interesting observation.
I love it. Well, that and chain smoking and being up all night and partying probably so hard for some of those years. I mean, it was very innocent to begin with, but then there was a lot of years of having a whole lot of fun.
I mean, I'm glad that it seemed like fun.
I mean, there was dark moments, and I think for some I love David Arquette's honesty and authenticity and sharing his stories. And for me, I was very fortunate. I had like an amazing mushroom trip that's in there. I think I've only done it a couple times, but I was very fortunate that the experiences I had were positive, and I didn't go a lot deeper into it in the way that some of my friends did, and in the way that some of my friends didn't make it out the other side.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I've had people in my life, not my friends really. My father killed himself. That's a different dynamic. And I have to say, I was really stunned at how many people in your life died. And in most of the cases, I think by their own hand. And the level of pain that they were experiencing, that depth of hopelessness. And I understand why you would want to put some of this footage away and need some time to live, to step back from it. Because that just had to be so devastating. I feel like we hear so much more today, as if seems like it's a greater amount of kids who are taking their own lives. But in watching this, it really struck me. Maybe it isn't that different. We just didn't know to the degree that we have today. But how did that, as you kind of closed certain chapters, how did that sit in you, and how does it sit in you now, having done this doc and opened this up to reconnect?
Yeah. That's an incredible question. Here's the thing. These were not superficial relationships. These were deep rooted friends that I really loved with all my heart. And when I look back at someone like Jonathan Brandis, who I spent endless days in school with, and our beautiful friendship for all those years, and we used to do this thing where we would leave each other voicemails, and we would, try to fill up each other's tape. So, he would leave these long voicemails. And so, of course, eventually you'd hit pound and or fast forward or go to the next one. And what was one of the things that I thought was so incredible was, in listening to the entirety of them, there's the moment that you hear him go, "I love her. I've always loved her." And that came at the end, the very maybe last 2 minutes of maybe a 20-minute voicemail, where he finally was opening up about his feelings. And so I think it's a classic example of, what do we keep under the surface? What do we not see going on in the world around us? And I've been so humbled and honored to continue talking to his parents, whom I love so much, and they love him so much. And you can have all of that love around you and still have so much pain. And I hope in some way that perhaps this can shed light so that people don't feel so alone, so that people can have conversations. I look at Justin Pierce, who I love so much, Harold Hunter, that friends that were just, all of the people captured that were just such deep, soulful relationships. And to lose them so young was so painful. And then also the guilt that I felt in finding a tape like my dear friend Sean talking about how he was really thinking about suicide. And I find this tape and he's saying it to me on camera, and I just didn't get it at the time.
And you were a kid.
I was a kid, and yet 20 years later, I totally understood. And it goes to this whole question that I bring up, which is, how often do we really look at each other and say, "How are you?" and really hear what the other person is saying? And so I hope in some way that it opens up dialogues, that it opens people up to reach out, to try and get support, to try and lean on each other, to open some line of communication. Because I think the numbers now, and as this pandemic and everything has happened, I mean, it is the mental health and pain and depression and all of these things are so all around us. And so my hope is that in some way, by sharing this, that perhaps it can
just spark an awareness that maybe it just needs to be present. And, I love what you're saying, which is, we do get busy. Everyone gets busy with their own lives and everything that they're going through. And, to just be present with people. And, if there's been any kind of gift or blessing, one of the things that's come out of this time that of extreme challenge and tragedy is I do think it's brought our focus to a place that's more looking for things that are more meaningful in our connections, how our time being spent in a more connected, meaningful way. And do you feel? I'm going to grab a tissue because my allergies, my nose is running.
No, please.
All right,
please.
one moment. I'm grabbing a tissue.
While you're there, I was just thinking about, that something beautiful that you said to me the night when we were with the girls last is about wanting to be heard. And so I'm also having to check myself on a constant basis. You know what I mean?
I do think that is a big thing that so many, especially when you're young, feel like they're not being heard. And they just want that acknowledgement, that understanding. And I know as a parent, sometimes I've jumped in too quickly to want to just fix it or find solution, when in truth, what they need is just for you to say, I hear you and I'm here, sorry, I cut you off though.
No, that's what I was saying, is just that I really have tried to wrap my head around the fact that also, yes, I want to listen. And my kids constantly check me on that. You know what I mean? On really listening more. And I think you're 1,000% right about this time and what it has done for us, and really looking within and doing that shadow work, and really taking this opportunity to also, for me, so much of it has been, how can I be of service to others? And really the kids and I looking at how can we be of service. And it has been, a huge transformation, because my life throughout this process has changed in so many ways.
I find the universe so amazing, and the divine intervention of how things are aligning. And the fact that you've been working on this doc for a few years, and in that time period, this reboot of Punky has come forward for you to step back into. And I just didn't want to leave that out of this conversation, because it's just so relevant to the circle of healing I feel Absolutely. That is occurring. And, oddly, as you know, not to toot my own horn, but I was intuitively feeling that it was coming to you. And then I think I had found the doll on eBay, the Punky, and I sent it to you.
The Punky doll.
I couldn't believe that you didn't have any of those. First of all, that just seemed ridiculous, crazy. How could you not have a toy? I love toys. And so what I'm wondering is just to share just a little bit about how this process and how this is.
It's so incredible, because I have wanted to do Punky for years. I've always wanted to bring Punky back, and the stars aligned. I worked with this incredible guy, Jimmy. He came to me. He was wanting to bring Punky back. I wanted to bring Punky back. We worked on it together. We brought in the most incredible Steve and Jim, who are so incredible. They joined the team. Then David Duclon, the original creator. I mean, literally, it was like the dream team. And I think through the course of the documentary, I gained more and more courage to really go after that which I wanted. And I will never forget, because we did the pilot pre-COVID, so we were able to have a live audience. and my godmom and my incredible soul sister, you, and Scout were there with me, and my mom and all of these other family members. But I'll never forget that I had a panic attack. I got so nervous right before the taping, and you and Patricia and Scout and I sat in my little dressing room, and I was so afraid. I was so nervous. I hadn't gone out on stage in so long in front of a live audience. And you said to me, "What are you afraid of?" And I said, "The little girl that doesn't know if she's good enough, the teenager who's insecure, the kid that doesn't know if she can do it." And you wrapped your angel wings around me. You let me let it all out. And once I let go of that fear, I was able to go out on stage and do it. And I am forever grateful for that. And that was like lightning in a bottle that night. It felt like lightning in a bottle. It felt mystical. It felt magical because it was beyond characters. It felt like such a part of us. This isn't just a show. These were our lives. And from that point on, the courage to do it just felt so right. And every piece, even shooting during the pandemic and doing it safely over fear, and being able to go and shoot the series during the pandemic when so many people were out of work, and just knowing that we needed to do this so we could get people back to work and do it safely and to be able to stay up and running. The entire experience felt so aligned with the stars. And the fact that it would all come full cycle to all happen again.
And the idea that they now are coming out almost around the same moment.
Really, and literally,
there's no accident.
I mean, literally, I remember Belissa's husband said, Belissa, the incredible Belissa at Hulu, he was like, "How did you plan it this way?" And she's like, "We didn't." And on top of that, the fact that Core Response, which I'm so honored to be on the board of, which the incredible Ann Lee and Sean Penn co-founded, and that is so deeply close to my heart, that we have the largest test site in the country right now at Dodger Stadium, that we've done over 340,000 vaccinations and tested over 4.8 million people across the country. And to be such a part of that, it all feels so aligned.
It's, when things are on the right path, when they unfold with ease and grace. It doesn't mean that it's easy or there won't be challenges, but the general flow is moving it forward. It's only when we try to fight to make something that isn't the right, that it becomes difficult, or what you would start to feel as suffering.
Yeah.
The ease and grace of it unfolding. Beautiful to watch, beautiful to witness. I was honored to be there that day. And, it always reminds me, I don't know if I said it that day, of having watched this Dick Cavett interview with Katharine Hepburn, who's always been, someone that I have greatly, greatly admired. And she said in the interview, I used to think, she was talking about being on stage, that that everyone was rooting for me to fail. And what I realized is that they're actually rooting for you to win. And how just that simple shift in how we're holding something creates a different experience. And that is what I certainly know has served me in redirecting my experience in life today. But I see that also for you, that you're letting go of the fear and the little girl that had to do things a certain way to be liked, or that if she wasn't that little girl that was cute and tiny with no boobs, that you weren't good enough.
Mm-hmm. And to be driven by love over fear.
100%.
And frequency, because you and I love physics and quantum physics, and I love the Einstein saying of set the frequency to that which you want to receive.
And that's it. And you will rise up, as will that which is around you. I want to circle back to something because I know you and I could chat for long periods, but
Sorry.
this is an observation actually.
Going
I
on.
just wanted to share because, and it's about Danny. And I just wanted to see if it's something that is just I'm making up or that I think is there, or if it's something you've seen. There's and this is so small, but there was something, you talk about things erupting and then it kind of moving. And I feel like I've heard you say, he was going to a dark place and so he moved away. And it's interesting, but in the time that when you're there in Tulsa, his perception is actually that you saw that he was going to a dark place and you moved away.
Right. I mean, you just put it so beautifully, and Dan.
So I don't know. So do you feel like that is accurate, that you actually recognized that he was going to a place that was too dangerous for you and knew you had to step away? Or did it feel in your experience, since you did not see him as really being in love with you, that he was moving away, that he moved away from you?
It's such a great question that I will be spending days thinking about. I believe that that he was, and as he says himself, that he was experimenting and things were getting so wild and crazy. And so there was so much partying and wildness around him. And in all honesty, in the diaries that I found, they happen to also coincide very closely to me then meeting Jason and then ending up in a more traditional relationship. And I think that's part of what he meant by the train. You know what I mean? Like, he knew that he was going down this path.
Yeah.
And I think that the interesting thing, and really looking back at the diaries, is that I was on this journey and this wild adventure with him, and so crazy about him. And then I met somebody who was very much the opposite and was much more traditional. And then I went in this other direction as he was going in another direction. So I think it was that we both, and I realize this now, and it's interesting because I even think about just how much respect he had for my virginity, how much respect he had for me, how much respect he had for me as an artist. And it's almost like, I think his love was so authentic and so genuine that he just wanted me to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense? And so
I think his love seemed to reflect that he didn't want to take you down.
Yeah.
And that, he says on there that that was just the tip of the iceberg. So my sense is that he went hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Into a super destructive kind of place.
Yeah.
And when you were maturing into a place that was, I would imagine, looking for where you wanted to go, something that was maybe felt safe.
Totally. And isn't it interesting that through this process that my adult self and teen self, the teen journalist and adult journalist, folded over? And I think in reality, I've become much more the person that I once was in so many ways. The fact that it transformed, I call it a transformation. I felt like after 24 years with someone, I couldn't call it a divorce or separation or anything like that. But the transformation of how our relationship transformed through the process of this documentary and rediscovering this sense of self. I mean, everything changed so much.
And, I think it's at different times we move into different places. And, I like that you're referring to it as I always look at that you're a family and will always be a family. The form of it is shifting to something that may be more supportive of where each of you are today. And, and whether it was the documentary or something else, as you were saying before, I do trust that everything happens for us, not to us. And that, this opened some things up that needed to be reconnected. And I think, even though you haven't spoken about it, I only a little, is that that there had to be some healing and really no longer operating as two separate entities. That young you and today you, because it is all you.
Yeah.
And they need to be honored. And what, is beautiful in this is the depth of honesty and openness that you bring to this, and the spirit that you are, and that it is an ongoing journey. That I was just looking at some things that, the question, as we're like getting close to the end, that I heard.
No, don't end. Keep going. I love it.
That I heard you kind of was your go-to. Well, actually, there could be two. So, so I'll do the first, to say, you ask everyone, what's your philosophy of life? What's your philosophy of life right now? And it can change.
Right now, and I think it was then, I think it is now, expansion. Expansion. We're here to expand, I think as spiritual beings in this physical experience, expansion.
And what would you tell your 13-year-old self?
I would wrap my arms around my 13-year-old self, and I would say, all of the love, all of the beauty, all of the messiness, all of the pain is going to bring you right to where you need to be every step of the way as part of your expansion, and it brings up that letter that I found in my 15-year-old self, writing that letter to my adult self, saying, who are you today? Who are, at the time I wrote it, I was 15, and I talk about being 15, almost 16, and who are you in your 20s, and who have you become? Have you found a place to belong? Have you made your life worthy? And I, at this stage in my life, had to look back and make sure that I was staying true to that little girl, that I was staying true to those words that I really believed fundamentally were so true to myself. And I think so often in life we can go into other directions, as we do, and sometimes we lose sight of that little girl. And so I would wrap that little girl up, and I would also say, thank you for leaving this chronological blueprint for me to find my way back home.
I think that is a beautiful place for us to come to completion. Not over, but completion.
Well, spiral, as I like to call it, because the spiral expands.
And I so appreciate, you wrote me earlier that, I've had the privilege of being in the room for every one of your births, and that you saw this as something that I was also being part of to give birth to. And it really is an honor. I love you. And,
so much. And I meant every moment of it. You have delivered all of my babies, and now to help me deliver this baby is just of the deepest gratitude for you. I love you so much.